So good. So good to have you with us tonight. We've had so many new people today in the 11:30 and the 9:30 services. It's just great. It's great to be in a church that's alive. Well, I mean, that wasn't a rhetorical question. It was a statement that was expecting a response. It's great to be in a church that's alive. It's so good. You know what makes church alive? Not the walls, not the lights, not the band. You make the church alive. The fact that God has taken your life and turned it around is what makes this place live and breathe. The gospel's more than words in a book. The gospel can be seen in each individual's life. We see the gospel unfold as lives get transformed in this very building. It's amazing. I love a church that's alive. I absolutely love it. Tonight, it's my great privilege to talk on in this new era, the new normal, and we're talking about greatness. Thank you. Sound effects help me preach. So if you just ever want to throw some sound effects out there, that will do me a massive favor. So if I fall over, you can go, womp, 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 womp. Any sound effects. I'll know that you're with me. So good. I was waiting for some kind of sound effect. Didn't happen. Tough crowd. Move on. Greatness. Greatness is an amazing thing, and it means so many different things to so many different people. As you sat down, I said, tell someone that they're great. Give someone a compliment. Who got a compliment? Anyone? Good. Is anyone familiar with the term backhanded compliment? Yeah, me too. A little too familiar. Here's a compliment that I had today. Someone came up to me and said, Paul, you've got a new haircut. Now, if it ended there, it was just a normal statement. But then they tried to sweeten it up with a compliment. They said, and it looks really good. And I thought, well, that's quite nice. Thank you. And here comes the backhand. Then they said, it really slims your face. Wow. It's one of those moments where you hear the compliment and you're like, no. In other words, hey, normally your face is real fat. I love backhanded compliments. They're just so funny. I've made a note of a few classic backhanded compliments. Here we go. Here's a great one. I get this a lot. If only I could be as laid back as you about all the clutter and the chaos in your life. See, it was a compliment at if only I could be as laid back as you. And then they just go, bam. In other words, hey, your car's a state and you look like you live in a shanty town. That's the interpretation. Here's another great one. I love it. This one really cut me deep, by the way. Still on the healing journey. I love it how you're not obsessed with personal style. Wow. Wow. In other words, let me just run that through Google Translate. Hey, it's so good how you just are cool with looking real bad all the time. Thank you so much. I love how people take an interpretation and they do what they want with the English language. Another thing, is anyone familiar with this concept called a humble brag? Yes. So just like a backhanded compliment, you see a backhanded compliment starts out as a compliment and makes its way to an insult. A humble brag starts out as humility and ends up as a brag. Here's some great ones that I found on Twitter just today as I was skimming through the Twitter feed. I feel so weak today. I guess I worked out too much in the gym yesterday. I just stepped on gum. Who spits gum on a red carpet? Seriously, these are genuine people that think that this is a normal way of communicating. Here's one of my favorite ones. All the dresses I thought I would wear tonight are too big. So good. Oh man, they never told me that at the Lambo dealership I would get pulled over like 3 times a week. # should have bought a Corolla. There you go. And this is my personal favorite, which I got off Mike Bray's Twitter feed. It's really great. Oh, just about ate 15 pieces of chocolate. Got to learn to control myself when flying first class, or they might cancel my modeling contract. So good. So good. So the English language, we can use it in the weirdest ways. So we've got the kind of backhanded compliment. We've got the humble brag, and is anyone familiar with the term the loaded question? Where you're asking a question, but there is an answer that is expected. The classic loaded question is, do I look good in this? And the answer is always yes. Always yes. No matter who's asking, whether they're just stumbled across you on the street and they say, do I look good? You just say yes. That person could be packing a gun, and if you say no, even if you stop to think, that's too far. Don't think, just say yes. I love the kind of the loaded question. And the question as parents that we ask when Nia, right, this is a true story. I've got a 4-year-old called Nia, and I've got a 2-year-old called Fion. Nia sometimes is annoying, but she's beautiful. And I go to Nia, do you want a smack? So, I mean, that's what we call a rhetorical question. This is what Nia said to me. She looked at me, and if you know Nia, she's like a little brown berry. She's cute. She looked at me and she goes, don't hit me, Paul. Burn. Then Nia drops the mic and just walks away. So good. So good. And here we are, right, in Matthew chapter 18, verse 1. And the disciples are asking Jesus a loaded question. They're about to muster up the courage between them to ask Jesus a very interesting question. You see, they've all been hanging around Jesus. They've seen miracles. He's just paid taxes, and that's kind of challenged a bit of their thinking. And then all of a sudden, they're gathering together, and they're asking each other this question. They're asking the question of who is the greatest. I love this part in the Bible because it doesn't say Peter went and asked Jesus, or Simon asked Jesus, or Judas asked Jesus. It's like they kind of knew they couldn't ask. So as a group, have you ever done that at school? Where you're like, I'm not going to ask. Well, let's just all ask. You know, Miss, can we do the conga line in French? You know, if you ask by yourself, it's risky. But if everyone asks, better yet, if no one asks and you just start congering, it only happened to me once. From that time on, I was in Indonesian class. Yeah, it was a tough life. But there's this moment where the disciples are gathering and they're about to ask this question, this loaded question about who is the greatest. Let me pick up what the Bible says. It's going to come up on the screen. In Matthew 18, verse 1, at this time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? He called a little child to him and placed the child among them, and he said, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like the children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, and whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. The loaded question of the disciples has had the classic backfire moment, where you're expecting a certain response when you ask the question, and the response you came back was not at all, and it took you off guard. You see, the reality is we all have a different definition of greatness. If you love justice and if you love the civil rights movement, maybe when I talk about the greatest people, you think of Martin Luther King. Or you might think of other great men and women that have gone and paid the price on behalf of the least and the last and the lost. Maybe you think of people like Gandhi or Mother Teresa, and these are the ways that you think of greatness. Maybe like me, you like technology and you think Google is great. 17 years birthday today, Google. We didn't sing them happy birthday. Android, come on. Where my Androids at? Nowhere. That's what I thought. I'm used to that. And you know, you may define greatness in the form of art and literature, and maybe guys like Mozart, when you think of greatness, you hear choruses and you hear melodies, or maybe you think of Walt Disney, people who shape the way we think of entertainment. Maybe you think of the Queen. Maybe you think of the Beatles. Maybe you think of the guy who invented Pringles. I don't know. But depending on where you are in your life and what you value in your life, you will define greatness very differently. So as the disciples come to Jesus with this loaded question, they're all expecting an answer. They gather together and they've already thought about who's the greatest. You know, Peter's like, well, I'm pretty sure I'm the greatest. Andrew's like, well, you know, I'm definitely better looking, so I'm probably the greatest. Judas is like, well, you know, I've got all this going on in my life, so I'm the greatest. So as they asked the question of the greatest, really what they were expecting Jesus to say was that you guys, my disciples, are the greatest. And even better if they got a shout out. And Jesus said, you, Judas, I mean, these guys are great, but you are the greatest. And winked at him. You know. Or you, Peter, well, you walked on water, so you're the greatest. And as we approach this question of greatness, we're all expecting a certain answer, which matches the framework of our lives. Because greatness is defined by our own personal experience. But then Jesus calls over a child. And standing amongst all these great men of God that have served and worked and lived and had matured in all the things of God, Jesus looks right past them and finds a child and brings them in the middle. He brings them right in the middle and he begins to redefine what greatness is. I've got my trusty easel on stage. I'm going to do a massive game of Pictionary. It's never been done before in a church context before. But when we think of greatness, I'm going to draw something simple. I'm going to draw a tree. And we have a tree. And we think, well, a tree or a real weird happy stick man. One of the two. And when we think of greatness, we think, what in my life can I build to make this life great? I want to look like this, so now I've got to go out of my way to live a way that builds this. Now let me unpack the loaded question. We have our friend Peter. You see, when Peter's asking Jesus who's the greatest, Peter's thinking, well, you know, I'm the natural spokesperson. I'm the natural leader of this group. I'm naturally called to ministry and I've been leading and I'm always there shouting. So there's Pete. And he thinks that surely the greatest are those in ministry. And then we go around the group and then we see Andrew and we see Jude. And they're practically related to Jesus. So when they're asking Jesus who's the greatest, they think surely the greatest and the being great is actually being in the family. Surely if you have a good family and life is all about family, and if my family's great, then I am great. Then we go around the circle and we see John. And John's got this wry smile on his face because he's thinking no matter what anyone else does or says, it doesn't matter because I know that I'm the disciple that Jesus loves. So there's John thinking, well, I know the greatest way to live, it's got to be all about love. He starts humming, all you need is love. He's thinking, surely greatness is measured by how much love is in your world. And then we get to Judas. This doesn't work being a left-hander. Then he gets to Judas. And Judas has the sound of change in his pocket. And he says, well, surely the greatest is those with the most wealth. Those who can use their wealth to actually change the fortunes of others. That can be influential in the city. Surely wealth is what greatness is about. Then we come to Andrew. Andrew, the first disciple who was called by Jesus. And there's Andrew thinking, you can do all you want. You can have all the things that you want, but he called me first. And there's Andrew. And Andrew thinks, surely loyalty is greatness. I've been at every meeting. I've been at 9:30, 11:30, 5:30. I go to life groups on Sunday and on Wednesday. I even tell people about Jesus at my workplace. Surely loyalty is the greatest thing. Being from the start to the end must be the best thing I can do. Surely being a part of the family and building a great family, surely that is what greatness is about. Well, surely it must be about love. If you love one another and if you're experiencing love, surely that is what greatness looks like. Surely it's about wealth and influence and bank accounts and being able to build and sell. Surely it's about ministry. Who can preach? Who can sing? Who can give to the needy? Surely this is what greatness looks like. And then all of a sudden, Jesus drops the bomb and he pulls a child. In the midst of all this, Jesus says, wait a second, guys. Hey, you come here. He brings this child. The disciples start to think, what's special about this child? Maybe this child's the next prodigy, is a savant. Maybe he's a genius child. Maybe he's been preaching in the synagogues. Maybe he's the child that is going to be the next king, and they start to think, what's so special about this child? Why the child? Well, there's a lot of reasons why it could be the child. Maybe it's about the simplicity of faith and the simpleness of a child's heart and the way they think. Maybe it's about just the way that the child is humble and isn't self-seeking. Maybe it's the way that child always looks out for others and is kind. But tonight I want to think about another thought of why the child was brought into the mix. Amongst all these great men, why were they all overlooked and a child was brought in? You see, the reality is this kingdom that we are a part of is an upside-down kingdom. It's the kingdom, but it's not as we've known it. It's not what the disciples expected. It's an upside-down kingdom. It's like limbo. The winner is the person who can go the lowest. It's not a game of high jump where look what I can do, look what I can achieve, therefore I am the winner. It's more like limbo where look at how low I can go. It's an upside-down kingdom, and as the child is brought in and the disciples are disputing about the significance, who is this kid, the penny starts to drop. You see, it was never about what that child had done. It was never about what that child was going to do. It wasn't about the child's achievements. It wasn't about what the child was going to achieve. Some people are slowly getting it. You see, there was a whole crowd gathered. Jesus, when he looked for someone to explain greatness, he looked past the person who was preparing food. He said, greatness isn't simply about doing this. He looked past the temple who was just over the road, and he said, well, I don't need someone from there. He looked past the people who were serving in the courts. He looked past the followers of Jesus. He looked past everyone, and he found a child. And the reason why he found a child was one simple thing. It was never about what the child could do or what it would do. It was all about the Father. What is great? Is greatness achieving stuff in your life? Is greatness building empires or building families? Is greatness done by the outworking of all these things and making life look and sound and feel like a certain way? Jesus simply says, no, greatness is not about what you do, it's about who you are. Oh, I've got some good news. Let me just spin this around. It's an upside-down kingdom. All the stuff that we thought was going to make us and shape us, all the things that when we think about greatness, we stick post-it notes of this is great, these are great people. Jesus throws it all out the window and he says the child is the greatest because the child belongs to the Father. And all of a sudden, all the stuff that we've been trying to build in our lives become almost insignificant in the light of the Father. We spend our lives trying to journey and build this thing. We try and find a path to greatness. We set 5-year, 10-year goals with our relationships, our families, our marriages, and our studies. And we say, if I follow this path will surely lead to greatness. Let me read you something from John 14:16. And that is this. It's a simple thing that Jesus says. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And no one comes to the Father except through me. You see, the way isn't a path, it's a person. The way to greatness won't be found in a career path. It won't be found in a social network. It won't be found in family or in wealth. The way to greatness isn't a path, it's a person. It's not a way to live. It's not a list of rights and wrongs. It's about the Father. It's about Jesus. You see, before you were even born, you were great. Oh, this is good news. This is good news for some people because you're trying to achieve greatness, and here I am telling you tonight that greatness has already been achieved on your behalf. So stop striving. Stop trying to prove. Stop trying to live a certain way and attain a certain standard. Be like the child. It was not about, and nothing to do with what he did or what he was going to do. It was all about who his father was. It was Jesus. Jeremiah 1 verse 5 says this: before I shaped you in the womb, I knew all about you. Before you saw the light of day, I had holy plans for you. You may say, Paul, but he's not my father. I'm here to tell you, no matter what you think, your world, no matter how you feel you got here today, before that moment happened, he formed you in the womb. Before your eyes saw the fresh sunlight occasionally in Manchester, he had holy plans for you. You see, you're his child. You're not great by how you live. You're not great by what you've done, or you're not great by what you plan to do. You're great because you're a child of the Most High. This greatness thing that we strive for, we already have it. You see, greatness will change with the fashions and the trends of the day. When I was 10 years old, I thought Pokemon was great. And now I just think it's pretty awesome. But greatness changes. And how we measure greatness and great people will change. It may be a football star. They may be great. Maybe a parent. Maybe a best friend. Your journey of your life will change how you perceive greatness. We can't measure what greatness is based on these things. You see, we approach God with a loaded question. And we say, what is greatness? And we cross our fingers that what is greatness is all the things that we're trying to achieve in our life. We say, God, is greatness ministry? God, is greatness raising kids the right way? God, is greatness having an amazing career? Is greatness promotion? Is greatness leadership? Is greatness family? Is greatness wealth? And we go to God and we say, I want to be great, but I want you to say what I'm doing is great. And God is saying, it's not about what you do. It's never been about what you do. It's never been about what you're going to do. And this hope one day that we will achieve this mythical greatness, riding on a unicorn to great town. It's never about that. It was never about the plans and the promises that you had for yourself, because there's already been plans and promises for you. You were great before you were born. You were great not about the things, but you were great about the Father. You weren't great because of how you lived or what you do with your life. You're great because there was one who came before you, who was the greatest, who died on a cross so you could call him Father. Before I shaped you in the womb. Sometimes we get hung up on the material. You're saying, God, how can you make this great? This stuff of my life, God. How can you make this clay, this life of mine, how can you make it great? See, it's never about the material. It's always about the craftsman. Don't define God by the material you give him and expect that what you give him, he'll make some hodgepodge job of a life out of it. That if you give him something broken, that he'll give you back a broken version of something better. It's not about the material that we present to God. It's about the God and the craftsman that we give the material to. And we say, Father, I may not have greatness by some standards. There may be parts of my life which are broken. And you know what? There may be parts of my life which are amazing. But I don't want to focus on the material. I want to focus on the craftsman. Will you make me great, God? And he whispers back from heaven, too late. You're already great. You see, before, Paul, sit down. You see, before you were even formed, before I formed you in the womb, before your eyes even saw the light of day, you were great. Before you thought about achieving goals, before you thought about grades and careers, before you thought about families and accolades and academia, before you thought of any of those things, you were great because I was thinking about you. Before it all. There may be some people tonight that say, but Paul, you don't know the story of my life. You don't know where I'm up to right now in my journey of finding greatness and figuring it all out. You don't know where I'm up to. Don't you think it would be crazy if I got out a book, I randomly turned to a page at the start of the book, I randomly picked a paragraph of the book, I randomly picked a sentence in the paragraph, and then I read that sentence out, the only part of the book that I had read, and I read the sentence that said, then John went to the valley. Closed the book and thought, well, that book's not very good. If I only took a small sentence of a story and defined the whole book by that one experience that I had. You see, the reality of your life and the journey that you're going through is God has written a story about you. Don't get stuck in a sentence that you're in. That God has written a whole story about your life, which doesn't just fix on one zone. You're not reading in repeat the same sentence. Don't give up. Because there's not just a sentence, there's a paragraph. There's not just a paragraph, there's a whole chapter. God has not only written chapters, He's written books and books because you are called to greatness. Your life, no matter what you do or how you live, is a story of greatness. You didn't write your story. He is the author. You may think, Paul, but this story I'm writing's got a lot of swear words in it. That's okay. You may think, Paul, but this story that I'm reading has had some stuff go down and I don't really like it. That's okay. Don't get stuck in a sentence. There's another sentence coming. It's part of a paragraph. It's part of a book. You see, this story you're not the author of. You may be the starring role, but He has the pen. And He's writing greatness. From day one, He was writing greatness about you. John 15:16, and I'm going to close with this. For you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you might go and bear fruit that will last. And so whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. There's a story being written about our church. It's a story of greatness. Greatness not defined by the real estate, by the number of people. Greatness not defined by the ministry. Greatness defined by the fact that overall the guy with the pen in his hand writing the story is a guy called Jesus. There's greatness in you. You may have thought you threw your greatness away. It's not yours to throw away. You can never unearn greatness. You can never earn greatness. It's not to do with what you thought greatness was. It's about being a child. And it's not just about being a child. It's about being His child. And you were His child before you were born. You were great. You are great. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to live away. You are simply called, made, created. There is a great story that has been written about you. Tonight I want to pray for some people, if that's okay. I want to pray for really two kinds of people tonight. I want to pray for some people that feel stuck in a sentence. Tonight I say, let's rewrite the story. Let's acknowledge together as a family that there's more than what we're in. That we're not defined by the accolades and the achievements, but we're defined by the Father. I want to pray for you. and believe that you will truly find what you're looking for when you ask the question to Jesus about greatness. The risk of not going to Jesus for greatness is you may spend your whole life searching for it and never find it. You may meet every goal you've set out to achieve. You may do all the things. If you're passionate about sport, you may hit the top of the game. If you're passionate about people, you may be like the new Mother Teresa. But if you never find Jesus, you'll never find greatness. You'll get to the top of a mountain and you go, oh, it's not what I thought. Because you can't earn greatness. You just are. You were born great when you were born a child of God.